Welcome to the Strange Story Podcast. I'm Mark Marinaccio, and I've been involved in the unexplained professionally for 20 years as a paranormal TV show creator, producer, and director. I've been all over the world and involved in every aspect of the field, from ghosts and cryptids to UFOs, aliens, conspiracies, and the afterlife. Now I'm bringing my experience and access to you through the experts, celebrities, and experiencers that I've met and worked with along the way. Today, I've got a special guest, a great paranormal investigator, Kristen Luman from A&E's Ghost Hunters. All right, Kristen, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
It's good to talk to you again and see you virtually in our new post-apocalyptic reality.
Yeah, our quarantine lockdown.
Right, of Skyping and Zooming in. Zoom got really, really popular, though, all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. Everyone's doing it. I think my wife and I have a Zoom couples game night date tonight with people, which I don't know how that works. But it's funny because it's actually gotten me to reconnect with a lot of friends.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
Just for some, I guess because everyone's bored. At night, at least, right?
Yeah.
So like old high school friends, like, let's all get together on Zoom, and it's actually been like just so much fun.
Yeah.
But it's like, and doing these sorts of things, I think that people are much more available now for podcasts and conversations and interviews because they're not out in the field, right? Like yourself. But you just were, and I just saw the season 2 premiere episode of the show. I thought it was really good, really well done. I love the style and the progression of the style of the show. Back when I did it, back in like season 3, it was very straightforward.
Yes.
There was very limited, let's say, B-roll or atmosphere, or we had like our 2 cameras, and looks, and that was kind of it. And you guys really have so much from the enhanced B-roll. And Kendall Welpton is a good friend, and I just think his eye and his sense of style is amazing, and it's been such a benefit to the show.
Oh, he's amazing. He's great. One of the nicest people too.
And is he still building his own gear? When we used to do it, he had his own jib that he built and everything. Called like
he has he does build some of his own gear, some of the flying equipment.
Oh, right, yeah.
Those shots. His own drone that we almost lost in Alaska. That was pretty scary.
Oh, really?
Landed on the boat that we charted. We got lost in the storm at sea. That was pretty frightening for him. But yeah, he does all his own stuff still, and he also just is an incredible person to work with.
Do me a favor. Can you either push your computer back a little bit, just a little bit, or tilt it up just a little bit,
or tilt it up?
Yeah, I don't want to. It's cutting off your head. Yeah, just do that. That's fine.
We're good there.
Yeah, you can get a little closer to it now if you want to.
Okay, because I will probably naturally lean in.
Okay, that's good then. Yeah, then leave it like that.
Okay.
Cool. So, I love the idea that you guys went and dealt with this whole town situation. I've always thought that's a great approach to, paranormal investigation. We can talk about it, but I'm a big sort of believer in the spaces where things happen are never limited to a room, or an attic. It's a little bit of a wider net. I've been watching The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch lately on History, and I've been fascinated with that place for 20 years, since the book came out. And it's funny because it's very much the same thing. It's a large area. And even now, while they're there, you don't really need to worry about the homestead where the family had the things happen, because it's all over the place. It's that whole basin. So I like that you guys went to a town, you looked at the different spots, but you had this whole town approach. And what was that? Was that the first time you've ever investigated a town?
No, actually, in Ghost Mine, when I was on Ghost Mine, we did a town-wide investigation.
So it wasn't just in the mine?
No, it wasn't just in the mine. Yeah, we did. We actually investigated the town associated to the mine, and we were just we had, DVR system set up everywhere, and we were just running from building to building, and that was crazy, but it was really awesome because it almost seemed like we were following something that was going from place to place.
And, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's it's funny because when you say following something, I think we may have talked about this in the past. You say following something from place to place. I think mostly everyone would try to put a human, some human attributes to that thing. You would
Mm-hmm.
think of immediately just something in human form, where I don't. When you say
Yes.
something, I think of, it could be an energy, it could
Mm-hmm.
be an object, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny though, because people will automatically think person, but I think that you're also sort of the skeptic, so you probably don't think of everything that people say is paranormal. Every instance that happens, and automatically say, oh, this is a person, this is a
Mm-hmm.
person who died.
Mm-hmm.
And is that, have you always been that way?
Yes, and that's what makes it difficult for me also to join groups, because I tend to sometimes be the naysayer and, pop people's bubbles or balloons. And so people don't like that because they want to get excited about
Right.
having an experience. And I'll bring up the logical or rational explanation that's here on Earth. And sometimes it doesn't go over very well.
Yeah. One of the other things, and I want to get into what happened there at the on the episode of the show, but one of the things I thought was really interesting, and people probably don't really understand much, is the fact that you had these experiences with locals potentially trying to chase you out of town, right? Like the
Hmm.
people who didn't. It felt very Scooby Doo, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
People didn't want you there. Some people
Hmm.
didn't want you there. I mean,
Some people.
we ran into that all the time
Hmm.
on the back in the day, and all shows do to some degree.
Yes.
But did you ever find out really what that was? What was at the center of that?
No, I think it's a close-knit town, but really we did have that town hall meeting in the beginning,
Yeah.
and we had over 100 people show up. We had to turn people away, and people were actually very kind. They made us the member of chamber, honorary member of Chambers of Commerce there actually. And so as we ran into some people that didn't want us there, but overall, I don't want to give out the impression that the whole town was against us, because that
Sure.
we didn't experience that at all. And people were very kind, and we received more gifts than we ever have from any other place. And the woman who hosted us in the building where we had our meetings and everything was very kind, and people would come by and check on us. But there were uh, a handful of people that were already kind of known in the town as being just sort of ruffians or bad ones that ended up a
Really?
lot of the time. Oh yeah, in jail.
Oh,
That
geez.
would, and since we were doing this town-wide investigation, we were walking around the town all the time, and so we run into these
Right.
people
Right.
that already have this reputation for causing a ruckus in the town. And so that's what we experienced. That's who we
Hmm.
also came into contact with. And the the police there would always try to make us aware if one of those people were out. We did unfortunately have to send somebody to jail who came up to us and was threatening us, and
Wow.
we had to call the cops on them. And the police kindly took them away, but they acted like they weren't surprised at all that they were having trouble with this certain
Okay.
individual.
So yeah, so it's people that are, already troublemakers just for
Yes.
a reason to make trouble. Okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Still scary nonetheless. It's just,
Yes, we haven't
people around
had
at
that.
night and
Yes.
alone.
When you're out in the middle of the night, or if you have, eh, we had another situation where some townspeople walked by, I think it was Mustafa and Daryl, when they were down by the river, and say, you're in the wrong spot. You should go down a little further by the river.
Yeah.
That's where all the killings happen. And just odd things like that. We
Like,
were
okay, thanks.
Or another woman drove by and pulled her window down, or rolled her window down, and told us about the witches that were there, but that she
Mm,
was a good witch, but we had to look out for the bad
yeah,
witches.
yeah.
So just things that we hadn't actually experienced in any town before, but then yet again we'd never investigated a town as a whole.
That's scary. You're creeping
Hmm.
around at night. You got people coming up. When I did the show, we had one of the guys on the crew was a pretty big, strong dude, and it was nice because whenever there was someone who sort of came up like that, he would just put himself right in front of the person, and,
Like that.
and everyone would get away. And it's like And he was like the crew bodyguard, yeah. But especially when we would go back after the investigation, and get to get like B-roll, or you're just doing cleanup, and like everybody's kind of gone and the lights are down, and that's when like the weirdos really start to pop out of the woodwork, and kind of it's easier for them to creep up on shit.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. That's the scary thing. I'm glad you guys got through that. And that episode I thought was really just sort of creepy as well, because it looked like you got pushed down the stairs, or you fell down the stairs. I mean, you felt like you got pushed. What
It didn't.
happened?
It didn't feel. I never felt hands push me.
Okay.
It never felt like I had some sort of a force that pushed me. But I also never felt like I tripped or somehow lost my footing. So it was a weird sensation where I was just walking down the steps and all of a sudden I'm flying and missing about six
Gotcha.
steps and landing flat on the ground. And so, that was one of the questions, because when you look at the footage, the way that my back is arched, it looks like I've been pushed.
Right.
How I flew with my hands back, because usually when you go down, you have your hands forward, but if somebody pushes you, you do one of these, and that's exactly how my body was positioned. However, I never felt like a force. I had hands on my back or anything like that.
How is this not the scariest place you've ever been, considering people are trying to chase you out of town, throwing shit at your car, you're getting pushed downstairs?
It
How
was
come,
probably the most frightening investigation that we have been on.
and, but you didn't bow out. How come you were like, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this.
Because we had also
What makes you so tough?
well, we'd caught some amazing evidence and that I had never experienced before. And so my curiosity took over any of my fear.
Sure.
And I really wanted to experience more or find out more about it. And really, that investigation, I think, left us with more questions than answers. So many times people want answers for what is happening, and you are only given a certain amount of time to try to find them. And unless miraculously get some sort of EVP that says, this is what's happening here and this is why we're here, it's hard to get an answer of what exactly is going on. And I also kept in mind the history of the town, the violence of the town, and also how people treated each other historically then, where it's a lot different than how we treat each other now. They would have been rougher with each other, but wouldn't thought twice of it. That was just the interaction at that time in history. And so was what we were dealing with malicious, or was it also just sort of what the environment was?
Right.
To us, it may be malicious, but we live in a different time period. Then it might have been just everyday life, and this is how you treat and talk to people. So you always have to sort of keep that in mind when you're doing any type of investigation, especially with all the history. I mean, we had to cast a wide net of who we were trying to contact, because so much has happened in that town, and it's changed hands and had all this different types of history with the mining and the gunslinging and all of this, and who brothels, so who we're trying to make contact with. And they joke around about it, but on that main street that we investigated, I mean, pretty much every building on that main street had at one time been a brothel. So also trying to reach out to possibly those women who worked in these brothels and what their lives were like to end up there. And so it was scary. However, like I said, and I think when you are passionate about what you do, your passion can take over any of your fear, and you are able to sort of put that to the side, and you really become more zoned in on trying to find an answer or trying to collect more evidence.
So you're a parapsychologist and you're a hypnotherapist. At what point do you wonder, is it your mind playing tricks on you in some of these
All the time.
scenarios? So you're always critical about that.
Yes. I think I miss a lot of things because of it. a lot of the investigators will have experiences that I won't talk about because I think that I come up with a logical explanation. For instance, we were investigating this one building, and one of the other investigators mentioned how their stomach had been hurting, and then another one mentioned that. And yeah, I've been not feeling well too, and I've not been feeling well, and I actually hadn't been feeling well that whole night as well, but I put it aside to, maybe something I ate,
Right.
or,
Sure.
I'm always thinking that way. Or if I do see a shadow out of the corner of my eye, I don't give a lot of credence to peripheral vision, um,
Why not?
because I
Because
know.
there's a lot of theories out there that that's where, these things exist.
Hmm. However, our mind also makes a quick judgment, and it always is on the lookout for a threat, and it will most of the time try to change any object or what you see into some sort of human like form, or that it possibly could be a threat, so it gives you time to get out of there. And that is our primitive mind. And so to me, when we see something in our peripheral vision, our mind will automatically go to, that could possibly be a threat, could possibly be a person, let's get the heck out of there, as opposed to what it possibly, it could just be
But
a shadow, an
it doesn't
object.
mean it's not something.
No, and it doesn't mean it's not something, but a lot of times when I see something, I won't speak up, and then another team member will say, "I saw this," and I said, "Oh, well, I actually
Yeah.
saw the same thing, but I just didn't say anything because I, sort of blew it off on, to my mind playing tricks on me." And in that investigation, when we were on that main street, Chase Creek, I did actually see what I thought was a shadow figure.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I put it off to, oh, it's Rochelle and it's our shadow on the building. And I pushed it aside real quick. And then I thought, no, Kristen, you need to, stop throwing these things away, and possibly let it be something that may be paranormal. And so I said, wait a second, Rochelle, let's stop and go back. I think I just saw something. I want to see if our shadow makes our we make a shadow on this building. And of course, when we walked back, we couldn't have made a shadow. The light
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in the right place for that to happen, so I possibly could have seen something that I would have originally just thrown out very
Sure,
quickly.
sure.
And so I'm trying to be better about that, and not be so skeptical where I don't speak up more about what I am experiencing.
I went to a fine arts university, something not many people know about me. And we always learned or, talked about that. It was just something that teachers would do, that, the professors would tell us is art hanging on the walls and in your home, for instance, are there hanging around more for the influence they have on you from them being in your peripheral vision, not
Mm-hmm.
from you looking directly on. I always thought that was interesting. So we already we know there's a different experience in our by seeing things in our peripheral vision than directly on.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how do we know that's not a more valuable way to look at things?
Yeah.
We you get blinders on when you look straight ahead, right? You're looking for something,
Yeah.
versus things on your peripheral vision are happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I when I hear you say that and other people's theories, it's a hard thing to resolve. Like
Mm-hmm.
which
Yes.
which sort of should it be, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
should you discount that or not discount that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to hear you say that you kind of look at, when you see that when you're something in your peripheral vision, you're not going to react as if it is something right away.
Mm-hmm.
Did you grow up in a haunted house or anything like that?
No, but I grew up very early on, just very passionate about the supernatural. I loved hearing ghost stories, loved hearing ghost stories, and every book in my grade school library I would check out.
Really?
Oh, I loved being scared when I was a little girl. And did the Ouija board, all of those types of things. I was a leader of the Ghost Club,
You had a ghost club
Ghost Club at 11 years old. We were
at
always
11 years old.
11 years
Was
old.
that middle school, junior high?
That is grade school.
It's still grade school. Okay.
Middle grade school. And
Wait, so who organized this ghost club?
myself.
So
And
you got some friends together and you're like,
mhm,
oh, let's have a ghost club.
yes.
And what did
Yeah.
you do in the ghost club?
Well, we investigated the playground quite often. Um,
That's
we,
amazing.
yeah, we allowed our imaginations to really take a hold of us. Slumber parties, we were always doing light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Okay, yeah.
I talk about how I would conduct past life regressions before I even knew what they were. I would have one of the other little girls lay on a pillow, and I would um, massage her temples and tell her to go back to a time and
So
that
you
she,
were born for this stuff. You didn't even
yes,
you did it early on.
yes.
You were investigating the playground with
Hmm.
flashlights and EMF meters before
Yes.
people had
Well, we didn't
EMF
have the
meters.
EMS meters at that time, but yes. And it's funny because I will have people reach out to me on Facebook from grade school, friends that I haven't talked to for a long time.
Remember that time we
Yes.
investigated
They're like, I cannot
in the
believe you're
park?
still doing I can't
Oh,
believe
that's
you made a career
amazing.
out of
Yeah, you made a whole living and a career out of it.
this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And past life regression hypnosis. Did you say you don't do that anymore?
I don't I've been trained in it, but I don't do it. I refer out for that
Do
because
you go
yes.
ahead? No, I want to hear why.
Because I was raised in a Christian household and I went to church quite often. I have those beliefs and I feel like they're very firmly um, in my mind. And even though I have experienced other things now that has changed some of my views, because that is, I feel so much innately in me and a part of my subconscious that I don't fully know if I believe in past lives, but I've witnessed some pretty miraculous things that I wouldn't want to transfer any of my disbelief subconsciously onto a client that I was working with because I haven't fully bought into believing into
That
it.
makes sense. That makes sense.
Yes.
Have you ever read the book or heard of the book Alien Interview?
No.
Are you interested in the alien UFO
Oh,
world
yes.
at all? Okay.
Yes, but I haven't.
So we could talk about that forever. But so there's a book called Alien Interview, and it's supposedly from the letters of the nurse who interviewed the alien captured from the Roswell crash.
Mm,
Right. So you have to believe in a lot of things just to get to this point to
yes.
believing that these are the letters. But and like look at that stuff and say, true or not, is there a new bent on a situation, a theory, an idea in there I haven't yet heard? um is there someone trying to put a bunch of pieces of a puzzle together in a way that makes sense and is interesting and so that's why one of the reasons I read that, it's fascinating because there's so many different ideas that come from supposedly come from the ET,
Hmm.
that are just great ideas, just really incredible ideas. One of them is the alien says that we're essentially imprisoned on this planet, meaning that when we die, our soul is essentially supposed to ascend
Hmm.
to a or go back, like what they call it, the source, or just out there, no longer here. But these ancient race of extraterrestrials who imprison us have created this barrier. So as you're going and ascending, you essentially get bounced back down to earth into a new life, into a new body. And the past lives, this theory supports the past lives theory in that your soul is continually re-inhabiting new lives and new bodies because it can't get out, it can't
Hmm.
escape, but it's bounced back to earth, which I think is a really fun, interesting take on things. I'm sure there's a philosophy or a religion somewhere that would probably support that idea, because I think a lot of these ideas come from ancient beliefs in certain
Hmm.
things. They're not something that somebody just came up with now.
Hmm.
And whether look, I'm not saying they don't come from an ET or civilization back in the way. I'm just saying there's probably different places we can look to find that.
Hmm.
But there's also the idea out there that you're not actually accessing past lives, you're accessing current lives in multiple realities or universes, sort of the multiple worlds theory.
Yes.
Are you familiar with any of that? Have you ever thought like that you're helping someone literally tap into another universe
Mm-hmm.
where that what their experience is taking place right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and during some experiences with some sessions with certain clients, it seemed to go in that direction sometimes.
Really?
And it would make me wonder, what's so awesome about what I do, but is also somewhat frustrating, is that I always feel like I get more questions than I have answers.
Uh-huh.
Because once I discover something new or something new is brought to my attention, now it's opened up this whole new can of worms where,
Sure.
now I have more questions about this than I did then when I began. And so the multiple lives theory and sort of, living on these sort of different dimensions and things are happening all at the same time. I've experienced that with clients when they've gone into hypnosis, and it's pretty remarkable to witness. Um, is that the mind creating a story
Who knows, right?
or part? Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and you don't want to go down that rabbit hole because you can't find the end to it. That's the way, you know, that's sort of why I like to delve into that area more, is because at least there's, you know, there's some quantum physics, you know, quantum theory that tries to explain certain things that I think we can apply to the unexplained and the paranormal. Whereas when I was younger and I was really interested in the UFO phenomenon, at a certain point I was like, I'm never going to find any answers to this. I'm just going to keep digging and going and going and digging and not know if something is true information, misinformation, you know, or what. And say, even if you then suss something out and say, okay, this object really exists. How do you know it's not military? How do you know it's not another country? How do you know it's not just technology? And you'll never get that answer. And if you do get that answer, what are the odds that it's going to be that, you know, that one thing that's the fraction of the 1% of the possibilities that you want it to be?
Yes, of
And you
course.
know that it's ETs. So I look at more contact stories,
Hmm. Hmm.
visitation stories. I enjoy those. I think those are amazing.
Hmm.
But more out of like purpose. What are the purpose of those? You know, these visitations. Are there is there an agenda that we can decipher from these experiences, and does that agenda seem to be working? And I
Yes.
think that's kind of a fun way to go. But we're getting off topic. That's a whole nother, you know,
Yeah.
episode, and I could talk about that for days. Um, but you know, going back to this investigation that you were just on, um, you know, you guys have that electron multiplier camera.
Hmm.
Is that what it is? Um, which I think is fascinating. I think you tried to explain it to me. It was way over my head.
Hmm.
But it's a camera that's used in like photosynthesis or
Hmm.
something, right?
It's
So
able to capture photonic events. And if you were to put it on the view of a tree, let's say, for instance, you would see different lights coming off the leaves as you're capturing the leaves going through photosynthesis.
amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so it is. It's remarkable. And there is this theory that, that spirits or entities, that they possibly could be made up of photons and illuminate their own light in a way. And so we wanted to use this camera to see if we caught anything based on this theory, and sure enough, we've caught a bunch of stuff that we've never seen before because of it.
You know, and I want to talk about what you guys did capture. I thought it was pretty fascinating. But to go back to science and quantum theory for a minute, the multiple interacting worlds theory, which is something I've always sort of subscribed to, but now it's being talked about more, is that the multiple worlds interact with each other, and their interaction takes place on a subatomic level.
Hmm.
And I think that this, you know, what you're talking about and the ability to sort of see protons in a space that's got paranormal activity always makes me wonder, is this evidence of what I believe in those places that have paranormal activity are places where we are seeing intersections of
Hmm.
these multiple worlds? So you guys pulled it out. You know, I saw what took place. I have some questions and some thoughts, but I really want you to tell the story, because I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that's would you call that the wildest thing that's ever happened to
Yeah.
you? Why?
Because I've been on these investigations, and you may see something out of the corner of your eye, or think you've seen something, or even um, hear a disembodied voice. But there was never, for me, in any investigation, an assurance that I was in a room with something that was unexplainable, for sure. I may get a disembodied voice, but whether that person is there still with me, I don't know, because then I don't hear anything later.
Right. So you what you mean to say is like at the time that you're in that space, knowing that there is something there also at that time in that
Yes,
space. Okay.
yes.
Because you're reviewing things later. You're not, it's necessarily real time
Hmm.
that you,
We're reviewing
okay.
things later, or we see things out of the corner of our eye, and we're
Right.
not sure whether or not it is still there with us. And so, with this experience, and I'll just tell the story of how it went because it wasn't fully shown in the show, is that Rochelle and I were supposed to go into this brothel on Chase Creek Street and do an investigation, but Brian and Brandon went in beforehand to make sure that this electron multiplying camera was set up properly, because Brandon is our technical genius. And so when they went in to make sure it was all set up, they actually immediately started seeing these, what looks like these sort of swirling lights. And not just one, but two going at the same time and making this strange swirling pattern. And in actually the doorway where there had been some witness accounts of this mist floating from one room to the other. And so Rochelle and I are hearing this downstairs, down below on the street, because they were just supposed to go in there to make sure it was all set up properly, and they weren't supposed to go in there to really investigate. And so we're thinking, well, this is our investigation. We're supposed to be, they're having the experience. We're supposed to be in there having the experience. And so we hear the guys on the walkie and through the headsets that they're, getting really excited and something's going on there. And so finally, they also want to make sure that whatever we've caught, we're not going to lose, because this is new technology.
Right.
We're still learning it and understanding it, and we don't want to lose anything that's been recorded on one of the cards in the camera. And so they want to pull the card immediately also and get it on a screen and be able to see it. And so they finally run down, and Rochelle and I head up, and we start to see the same anomalies that they had seen. And I actually walk towards it because I want to see if it's interacting, if it will
Sure.
interact with
Right.
me. And unfortunately, though, we're not being able to see it with our human eye. We can only see it on the screen of the camera, of the EMCCD camera. And so, which it has a certain width that you have to be able to stand a certain amount of distance away, or it's too close and you won't be able to see anything. So there's no way we can move the camera any closer to that room. We had to have it at a certain distance to be able to see anything through that screen. And so Rochelle's watching the screen while I'm walking towards this doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time in my life that I knew that I was going to for sure have interaction with something that I saw that was unexplainable.
Okay.
That I knew was there, for instance. And unfortunately, though, while I'm in this process, I can't see it. So I'm trying to call back to her while not disrupting the investigation, because whomever or whatever I'm trying to reach out to, you don't want to scare away by yelling, "Hey, Rochelle, can you see it? Are these lights moving around me?" And so, but again, I'd never been in that situation before, and I wanted to handle it very delicately. And so I wasn't sure what she was witnessing, because we were far enough distance away where we couldn't hear each other. And so I went into that room and into that doorway and did my best to try to reach out. But again, I don't know who I'm reaching out to. Am I reaching out to one of the guests of the brothel? Am I reaching out to a woman who worked there? Am I reaching out to a minor who stayed there? So I am doing my best to try to make this communication. And with all my training that I've had, and I consider myself a pretty good speaker. I'm not very shy. I, I was having a very difficult time having the right words come to my mouth because I wanted to um, engage whomever, whatever this was, not scare it away,
Yeah.
um, and make this contact and make this connection, and do so in such a way that whomever it was or whatever it was would want to engage with me. And so it wasn't until, unfortunately, that I got back to Rochelle to find out, okay, was it there with me? And she said that as soon as I got up to the doorway, that it would actually, these lights, these swirling lights would disperse, but within about 10 seconds of me walking out, they would come back again, which also to me told me that they were aware of my presence, or it was aware of my presence, and that I wouldn't say that I necessarily frightened it away, but it perhaps didn't want to interact with me in the same way that I was trying to interact with it. But that also gives me clues to that what we are dealing with is probably intelligent because it is aware of my presence. And for me, though, that was the most incredible experience I've ever had, because to be able to see something on the screen of a camera that you know is able to film and see in a different visual light, in a different spectrum of light than our eyes are able to see, and you see it right there, but then you're looking straight on, and you're not seeing it, but you're seeing it on the screen. And then to approach it not knowing what was going to happen, that was the other thing. You know, the guys made a joke that it looked very similar to the movie Poltergeist, when you see these swirling spirits coming down the stairs, and that is exactly what it looked like. And so I didn't know what was going to happen once I approached it, but I knew it was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really one of those moments where I really held, I held my breath of, is this going to invite me in? Is this going to be cordial? Is this going to not be happy that I'm in its space?
Right.
And but to me, the feeling that I felt when walking into that doorway was really just this beautiful sense of awe. It wasn't a fearful feeling. It would almost like I was seeing an angel or something for the first time. It was a real powerful feeling of peace and excitement, and something making a connection with something else where maybe possibly both didn't understand each other. It was just a really powerful experience for
And
me.
is that like, is that what you've been doing this for over 10 years? I read,
Mhm.
you've been on over 100 investigations, right?
Mhm.
Why is this experience the one for you that is the most meaningful above all the other ones?
I think it's because I could visually see it,
Is
but
it? Is that what it was?
yes,
Just
right.
seeing it?
Visually see it, but only with a certain scientific equipment that I wouldn't be able to visually see with my eyes. Um,
What about the feelings that were associated with it that you just talked about?
and that too as well, that it was, but part of that
Which is
had,
more important to you, that you saw it with your eyes or the feelings that you had
I think it
from it?
was that I think that neither one is more important than the other. I think that they are because of the other. I think it's because I could see it and I saw it in this beautiful way. It was beautiful. It was these swirling lights that were beautiful. That's what made me perhaps feel more safe and comfortable, and that I was witnessing something that was miraculous as opposed to something that was threatening and scary. Now, if we saw on that camera some dark shadow figure that seemed to be, looming in the doorway, perhaps I would have walked towards it with a different feeling. But because it was so awing to me, that it made me feel, I felt safe, and I felt like that I was connecting with something that wasn't harmful, or had no
Okay.
threat.
You know, i- when I looked at was watching the show and saw the footage, and there was a still frame, right?
Mhm.
It looked, what struck me, which was really crazy about the picture, was, there's that line of light, but there's more solid line at the base of it, and then a fading light
Mhm.
top of it. And it reminded me of They're those deep sea creatures
Mm-hmm.
that live in like the pressure would crush, any living thing on Earth,
Yeah.
but they live down there and they're sort of translucent, but they've got, that runner of solid at the bottom. So when I saw it, I actually felt like I was looking at something that was living in the
Mm-hmm.
moment,
Mm-hmm.
that was there.
Mm-hmm.
I I wonder about that. If you took that camera and just started pointing it all over the place, would
Mm-hmm.
you see a bunch of, invisible, living things swimming around the sky?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get, on top of all those feelings and those the sense of what you got? Did you get a sense of this is something here and now, like you're talking about, like you talked about wanting, or something that existed before and you're seeing it now, meaning something that was living and is now dead,
Mm-hmm.
or energy of something living that's now hanging around versus something that exists right now on its own, independent of people and physical form in the past?
That's a very good question. In the moment, I
Thank
would,
you. I try to have a
yeah,
few of them
that was a
every
great
once in a
question
while.
because I never thought of it that way. Um, and I think back to that moment, it was more of a feeling of something here and now. But yet, it doesn't take away that it could have been something living from the past. But I felt like it was living in that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the question would always be wondering if that means it only existed or exists now, or if it's, the body has died and the separation of energies takes place and this one still exists in the space
Hmm.
here and now, very
Hmm.
much alive in its own form, in its own way,
Hmm.
but was a part of something else
Hmm.
physical in the past,
Hmm.
versus no, this is its own thing, that this is where it lives
Hmm.
in between spaces, kind of, so to
Hmm.
speak. So you guys have used that camera since on multiple investigations,
Yes.
I hope.
Yes.
And there was reference in the show that this wasn't the first time you guys had used it, so I'm assuming that wasn't the first episode you
Mm.
filmed of the second season. So, given the option, would this be your go-to piece of equipment in the
Oh yeah,
future?
we want to take that everywhere. But also keep in mind that we had that camera running in that room for a good couple hours before anything was ever seen on it.
So the people could have been sort of the impetus to the activity, right? Because they
Possibly,
walked in
or
on
it
it.
could be right place, right timing. I mean, that's
Sure.
what I'm saying. When you end up with all these, you end up with more questions than you do answers, because so much of this could go into right place or right time. What's going on in the environment to make this be able to for us to be able to visibly see it in this way. Does it have to do temperature? Does it have to do with um, the atmosphere outside, the weather? All these different things can play into being able to witness something manifest. And a lot of people who viewed this thought it looked like something was trying to manifest because it did look like more than one thing. So was it something trying to come together, or was there more than one entity there? Because they were swirling and almost seeming like they were interacting with each other. It looked like, and some people mentioned it looked like little fairies, and that's what it did look like, these little fairies flying around and interacting in these strange patterns. And the weird thing too is that you have to think about that spiral pattern that we see so much in nature.
Right.
And so then you start to get to the science of it. And if you actually, and Mustafa posted some pictures on the A&E Ghost Hunters website, where you have the still frame of what we caught, and you do see this almost rainbow of light within it.
Mm.
But the pattern it made while it was moving was this perfect spiral. And so you add that in, and I mean, it all becomes this very incredible experience that, again, brings more questions.
And the spiral of light, I've talked to this, one of my own experiences when I was younger, I was in my 20s, was seeing a spiral of light appear in front of me,
Mhm.
spiral and then gone in a moment. And I had never heard of them before that, but then, in research, that's something that people see. They see these
Mhm.
corkscrew spirals of light, and some people catch them on film that no one knows what they are, or what
Mhm.
they come from. Has anyone tried to give sort of debunk the unexplained and try to explain it through any kind of science, non-paranormal effect?
Yes, and unfortunately, that wasn't on the show as well. We did call a friend acquaintance of Brandon's who has a double major, chemistry and I believe biology, but I'd have to get that right. Um, who's very experienced in all of this and the first person to ever have a double major simultaneously in these two fields. And he could not explain what he was witnessing.
Anybody
Um,
on the like online on social media afterwards try to say, because it's sort of like crowdsourcing. You get people like,
mhm,
oh, I know this. This is X, Y, and Z. Has
mhm.
anyone tried to step forward and say this is what it is?
I read some comments that I wouldn't be able to repeat verbatim back to you right now of giving explanations that were fairly scientific of but not in the way of being able to debunk it scientifically.
Right, meaning like no one was able to come forward and say, we see this all the time at
Yes.
X, Y, and Z,
No.
and it's
Yes.
which is fascinating. It's really fascinating. I think that if I have to think that's the first time anyone's captured moving image of that phenomena,
Mhm.
right? That's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
Yes.
That's something that you can probably, tip your hat to and say of all of your years since the 11-year-old girl investigating on the
Yeah.
playground, all of this time you spent from ghost mine and through schooling and through investigations, you may have produced something that no one else in the field ever has. And that's sort of such a I can see the way you're smiling right now. It's a
Yeah.
great feeling, right? Like to
Mhm.
probably a lot of investigators, and enthusiasts would love to be in your
Mhm.
position in that way.
Yeah.
Can you live off the high of that for a while? I
I mean, look at
mean,
my face. I'm glowing again.
yeah,
And when I was in that experience, I was teary eyed and I had the biggest smile on my face. I had when I was trying to interact with whatever that was, I had the biggest smile on my face and I just felt so at peace with it. Like this was, I felt like I was experiencing a miracle and I didn't know what it
that's
was, but I
fascinating.
knew it was miraculous and I was there. It was there around me and it was just this sort of beautiful feeling.
What is it in our minds, in your mind, that makes that experience trump any others to that degree? Is it the visuals? Is it because we lead with our eyes in everything we do?
I think it is the visual, but I also think it's the visual of not being able to see with the human eye, but being able to see with a certain
Right,
scientific
sure.
equipment and having that be now the question of, is this possibly around us all the time? Um, and we're just not seeing it. And other things that we've captured on this camera that really just give more credence to that we possibly are surrounded by entities or anomalies or whatever word you want to label, and we're not visually able to see it, but it's there. And what I also thought that what was so also beautiful about it was this sort of rainbow of colors, and that it was a light, because when you think of a light, you think of goodness
Right,
or
sure. Not dark.
peace, and that's what we were witnessing, and it showed itself in this way. I think that's what added to the beauty of it and to the perhaps the more peaceful feeling of it.
And who knew to use this camera? Where did that
Brandon,
start from? So
Brandon,
Brandon.
our
And
technology.
and here's like I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, if I can get my hands on that, that would
I
be
know,
so much fun,
everyone's
right?
saying
Like I
that.
I, I think 20 years ago I wrote a story about some professors at school and their team that were using cameras to show widows their dead ex-husbands before they passed away as a treat for them. And I'm watching this, I'm like, oh my God, that's the camera they would use. How can I get one? And my
Mm,
guess is going to be that this is not something people can get their hands on very easily, right?
no,
So
no.
so that's sort of, we talk about how progressing the field,
Mhm,
and a lot. And I think that you guys, I would hope, have done something now that can create an interest and a desire, a want for that technology
Mhm.
that can then make it accessible to more people to use in different ways in different places.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how that happens. Like, look, before Ghost Hunters, you couldn't get a thermal imaging camera for less than like $4,000.
Yeah.
Now, like $20, you can get one off
Mhm.
of Amazon.
Mhm.
Um, so I hope, kind of out of personal reasons,
Yeah.
I hope this becomes very available. Otherwise, I'm going to
Mhm.
have to, hit up Brandon and ask him for the guy's info so I can go hang out with him one weekend and take it over to like Glen Tavern or
He's
something
very
like that.
protective of it
I'm
too.
sure he is. I'm sure he is. I mean, it's a great score. So, look, I hope that plays in future episodes because, again, I just think that being someone who enjoys trying to understand the science of the
Mhm.
unexplained, there is something that, that can be helpful.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's going to require probably a lot of people really looking at that footage, that evidence, the way
Mhm.
the camera works, trying to explain it and trying to debunk it. You have to try to debunk it to know
Yeah.
that you can't first.
Mhm.
And if that becomes the truth, and then recreate it, which you guys do tried with the pillows and the dust.
Mhm.
And if it's not recreatable, that's a weird thing to say. You recreating it with something that we know what it is versus recreating a situation that allows it to happen again,
Mhm.
because that would sort of be step three, right? One,
Yeah.
debunk; two, recreate; three, establish a situation and environment where it can happen again and sort of be
Mhm.
duplicated.
Mhm.
Um, so I think probably a lot of people want to say thank you to
Yeah.
you, these guys, for coming up with something like that. I
Mhm.
think it's fantastic. I
Mhm.
don't know where you go from here in the rest of the season
Mhm.
because that's kind of like
I know.
pretty amazing. But I assume you have great stories that you'll be telling in the future and episodes that
Mhm.
we'll see. You know, um, I think that I I really enjoy not just that, but I enjoy talking to you because of your background and your understanding of the mind and the fact that you have this skeptical approach. Although, don't get me wrong, I love talking to people who believe everything as well because
Yes.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because look, I think a lot of us, at least me, I'm a kid
Mhm.
inside still, and it's the wonder, the amazement, the amazing stories of the impossible that draws me and makes me interested in these things. So anytime someone else brings the same giddiness for the unexplained,
Mhm.
I'm right there.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that.
Yes.
I'll just say
And
that.
don't get me wrong, I do get very giddy. Brandon and I were jumping up and down after it happened and hugging each other, and I had tears in my eyes, and like, this is so incredible. This is amazing. But then I start to go, but wait a second, could it have been a bug? Could have been a dust? Could have been, Then I start to, after I get over the initial awe of it all, then my brain starts to go back to that logical, rational. Okay, don't get ahead of yourself. Let's see if we can answer these questions. And then that's why I thought they did a really great job of trying to debunk it, um, and setting up the camera in the same exact position and way to create dust. And if it was an insect, you would have seen it more detailed. You would have been able to tell that was an insect. And then, as well as using the candle or the match, which tells us that whatever it was, since it's so similar to that of the light of the match, that whatever it
Hmm.
was creating its own light source, which is pretty remarkable. And so I do feel like we did our due diligence on that. And other things that we've captured throughout the season and that you'll see, nothing is the same, which again brings up more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Everything that we have captured on that camera, everything has been different. Nothing
Oh
has been.
wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
That's a great tease
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
next time. So was that episode 1 and 2? So what do you have, 8 more to go for the
Hmm.
season?
um it was episode 1.
Okay, so
And
just 2 parts. So you have 9 more
yeah.
episodes in the season.
Yes. Yes.
Great. So when is it on? Tell everybody when it's on. Make sure everyone knows how to find it.
Thank you. It's on A&E at 9 p.m. and
Wednesdays.
on Wednesdays. Thank you for that, Mark. I started to go into the how excited we are to, you know, show everybody our findings. But Wednesday, 9 p.m. on A&E, and there's just a lot of exciting new discoveries. What this team really, our purpose was to mesh science and the paranormal together. We want to make this a scientific exploration as opposed to this pseudoscience or something that people roll their eyes at. We want to be able to explain this with science. So all of the equipment that we use is science-based, not made for the sake of paranormal activity, because if it's made for searching out paranormal activity, it's already made with a bias. And so we only use equipment that is made for science that we bring over into the paranormal realm. And so that is our main objective as a team, is to bring science really and integrity back to the paranormal.
Well, good job. I think you accomplished that with this episode.
Thank you.
I'm looking.
I know, it's exciting.
Right. And so, where can everybody find you? Let's hear your social handles. Where do you want people to go to follow you?
I'm on Kristen Lumen 1 on Instagram, and Kristen Lumen Paralog. I'm on Kristen Lumen Hypnotherapy on Facebook, but that's more for my hypnotherapy clients.
Okay.
To set up hypnotherapy appointments. And then I have my Kristen Lumen Parapsychology Research, and that's also on Facebook.
And then on Instagram, you said Kristen Lumen 1.
Kristen Lumen 1. But you can still put in Kristen Lumen and I'll still pop up on
there. Are no other Kristen Lumens.
There are no other.
You're the one that shows.
Actually, there are, because that's why I had to put a 1 in my name. So that's why.
You just don't want people to know that you're number one. You're like, look, there are no other Kristen Lumens that are better than me. Before anyone else takes the handle, I'm putting number 1. That's what you should have done. Kristen Lumen number 1.
Number 1.
That is really cool. So I was like, oh, I guess she's number 1. No reason to talk to anyone else. Well, this was great. I think I appreciate you doing this. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I'm glad I got to talk about everything.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode of the Strange Story podcast with my guest, Kristen Lumen, then please follow us, subscribe. You can find us anywhere that podcasts are found. The Strange Story podcast is what we're called. And also you could go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Strange Story Co. That's Strange Story with a CO at the end. And get more information, updates, and links to the video version of this podcast. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out next week's episodes when I have on Jack Osborne of Travel Channel's Portals to Hell.